Cassette 5. Chapter 9. Friendship. Page 115. Listening for specific information. Step 1.
Listen as each person gives the name of a good friend. Draw a line from the first column to the second column to connect their names. Then write down when and where they met.
Otis, can you tell me the name of one of your good friends?
Oh, gee, that's difficult. I have so many good friends.
Okay. Tell me one.
Okay, Tom.
And when and where did you meet him?
At Yale after World War II. That was 1946. We were in the same class and we had a lot of interests in common, like music,
David, who is one of your best friends?
Let's say Douglas.
And where did you meet him?
In college. We were both studying music.
And when was that?
Oh, let's see, 1968.
Pam, can you name a good friend of yours?
One of my best friends is Jeanette.
And when and how did you get to be friends?
Back in 1967, I think, when we were in grade school. We were both social outcasts.
Yeah?
Yeah, we were both terrible at sports.
Tony, can you tell me the name of one of your best friends?
Hubert.
And how did you meet him?
We met in college. We were in classes together, and we just got to be good friends.
How long ago was this?
How long? 27 years.
Catherine, who would you say is one of your good friends?
Odette.
Okay, Odette. And when and where did you meet her?
I met her in graduate school, and that was, 1985.
Ruth, who's one of your best friends?
Oh, well, the first person that comes to mind is Esther.
How did you get to be friends?
Well, I met her in 1982 at my synagogue. I already knew about her from another friend, and when I met her, I just knew I wanted to be friends.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 9. Friendship. Page 117. Answering true-false questions. Step 2.
Catherine, how long have you and I been... How long have we known each other?
Let's see. We met when you interviewed me for a teaching job. Was it 7 or 8 years ago?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, that's right.
But we began to be friends. I think what might have started it was when I asked you a favor, which was to help me give my cat Sophie a flea bath.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that was hard for me. It was hard for me to ask that kind of a favor to someone I didn't know that well. Because, it seemed fairly bothersome, but it turned out to be kind of fun.
Yeah, it was fun. I still have the scars.
Oh, she had a lot of fleas on her.
She had a lot of fleas on her, yeah. Well, yeah, and after that we started to be good friends. One thing that I've realized about you is that you have a lot of close friends from, different periods in your life.
Uh-huh.
How have your friendships gotten started?
Well, I'd say that most of my friendships have sprung from some kind of a shared interest, either at work or school or somewhere else. I have made a lot of friends at work. I value work a lot, and I feel like I have a particular work ethic. And so if I'm working with other people who have the same work ethic, that for me is something very large that we have in common. It makes for a good base for a possible friendship. Or sometimes it's just that I have some sense of yeah, this is a person that I'd like to get to know. Because I heard them make a remark that I thought was funny. Or I observed them in some situation, or we work well together, or we have some common interest.
You mentioned your friend Odette earlier. How did you two get to be friends?
Oh, well, let's see. I was going to graduate school, and I was taking a course in linguistics. And I noticed this other woman in the same class, and I really liked the way she looked. The way, you know. And I remember thinking, oh, she's too cool. She would never want to be friends with someone like me. And I didn't talk to her because I was just so intimidated by her coolness. Oh, gosh. And then I think what happened, we were in a study group together and got a chance to talk. At some point, she revealed to me that she thought I was too cool for her, too. And we ended up being great friends.
Good.
Oh, yeah, and we realized that neither of us was that cool after all.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 9, Friendship, page 118. Summarizing what you have heard. Step 2.
Catherine, you have quite a few long-distance friendships. How do you maintain them?
Yeah, well, friendship is very important to me. I think friendships need tending. Yeah, I put a big value on being current with my friends, and that's something that's hard to do long distance. But there are friends I have that I don't live close to that I have managed to stay very close to. My friend Odette lives back east, and she's not much for writing letters, so we talk on the phone at least once a week, usually for, an hour at a time, and we take turns calling. So I stay current with her by talking.
So how are your phone bills?
Oh, my phone bills are high. But I consider it just like one of my living expenses. You know, like rent. And then there's several friends that I do write, because I love to write. And I love to get letters, and it's a cool thing, because I have, it's a concrete record of, of what we were doing.
You say...
Yeah, I save all my letters.
Do you reread them?
You know, I don't. I don't on a regular basis, but there's something about throwing away a letter that I just can't do it.
Yeah.
And I've got quite a collection. My one friend, Doug, especially, he likes to write, and I've been writing to him for, about 20 years now. Yeah. We met when we were working at the same place, and then he went to Taiwan for 2 years. And we wrote letters. We didn't know each other all that well, but we got to know each other through letters over the first 2 years, and ever since then we've been good friends.
That's nice.
Yeah, it's cool. Although when I first saw him after writing him, for 2 years I was a little nervous that we wouldn't be able to function without a pen and paper between us, because I felt like, my God, I've never spent time with this person. I've just said all these things, and he knows all my secrets, and I know all his secrets, but we haven't spent time together. But it was okay.
So, some friends you telephone and others you write to?
Oh, and email. I had one friend who just wasn't into writing letters, but she got online, and email is her thing. And since I've gotten an email address recently, I've discovered I've heard from her like twice a week for the past 2 months, which is unprecedented. I've known her for a long time, since I'd say 1980, I think, and we've always considered ourselves friends. But I haven't. I've kind of been in and out of touch with her, and now I'm back in good touch with her, because she'll sit down and write me a letter on email where she just couldn't do it on pen and paper. So that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm all for email. I just think it's another way to keep in touch.
Yeah. So, in your view, what is it that good friends do for each other, Catherine?
Well, I think I feel like one thing I want my friends to do is to call me on things. To let me know if I do something that upsets them, or for whatever reason. I think that's one thing friends, do for each other, and that's why sometimes friendship can get prickly and hard. And you can fight, but I've never felt fighting was bad. It's just showing that you care. Mm-hmm. But other things, I think friends provide comfort and support and adventure and jokes. Especially with old friends.
Jokes.
Yes,
Yeah.
you share jokes that you've created together that you've understood, and all you have to do is say one word, and the other person can go off into peals of laughter, and that's pretty,
It's powerful.
Yeah, it is. And it's a great way to mark time, I think, to realize that you've actually accrued this common
History.
Yeah. I recently emailed my friend Corey back in Chicago about a problem I was having in my personal life, and he wrote back with making reference to an argument that he and I had like 10 years ago, and he still remembered, and I still remembered, and it was really funny. And I'm sitting there, and I'm kind of depressed, and I read his answer, and I just started laughing because it was it was a joke. He made this joke that was only funny because we've known each other for so long, and we have this great history. Yeah, so it's kind of like, I think of friends as the family that we get to choose. And that's why friendship's such a wonderful thing.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 9, Friendship, page 121. Note-taking, using morphology, context, and nonverbal cues to guess word meaning. Step 2. 1.
But it's also rather subjective. Friendship means very different things to different people.
2.
As a therapist, I'm always thinking about a client's social network. When I'm working with a client, it's always critical to take into account that person's support systems. And by that, I'm talking about family and friends.
3.
You probably know of adults who consider themselves loners and say that they are content with that condition.
4.
There can be a lot of pain involved with friendship. It's a risky business. When we make friends, or try to make them, we become vulnerable to rejection. Each of us probably has a painful childhood memory of being cast aside by one friend in favor of another.
5.
And the senator said, "But what advice did you give her?" The woman replied, "Well, I didn't give her any advice. I listened to her." And the senator was incredulous. He was absolutely incredulous. He said to her, "What do you mean?"
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 9, Friendship, page 123. Listening for specific information. Step 2.
In some respects, friendship seems like a very straightforward topic. Everyone wants friends, and most of us have friends. But it's also rather subjective. Friendship means very different things to different people. What I'll be focusing on today is the importance of friendship to me as an individual and as a psychotherapist. And then on some differences I have observed in how men and women view friendship. My first memory of consciously contemplating friendship was as a young boy, about 6 or 7 years old, in 1963 or 64, and Barbra Streisand had just come out with her song, People. People who need people are the luckiest people in the world. And my older brother bought the record and played it 24 hours a day. And I kept hearing it. And I remember thinking, Is that really true? Do we need people? And is it okay to need people? And as I've gotten older, more and more I tend to answer that question in the affirmative. As a therapist, I'm always thinking about a client's social network. Along with sleep patterns and appetite, this is an important indicator of a person's general functioning. When I work with a client who's suicidal, it's always critical to take into account that person's support systems. And by that, I'm talking about family and friends. Does that person feel supported in the world? Do they have meaningful connections? There are two reasons why I think about that. And the first one is, the person who does feel supported is much less likely to attempt suicide in the first place. Suicide is very often the manifestation of an abject sense of alienation. And second, if a person is suicidal, it's very important to hook them up with their support systems so that they can be monitored and kept safe. Someone without friends is almost certain to be depressed. You probably know of adults who consider themselves loners and say that they are content with that condition. My sense is that while that may in part be true, it's almost always the function of a defense mechanism. There can be a lot of pain involved with friendship. It's a risky business. When we make friends, or try to make them, we become vulnerable to rejection. Each of us probably has a painful childhood memory of being cast aside by one friend in favor of another. And that really hurts. Rejection by friends is especially painful for children. So many loners, after repeated rejection, adapt by consciously deciding not to get close to anyone. It's easier that way, and it's less painful. In effect, they're saying, if I tell you who I am, and you don't like who I am, that's all I've got. So I don't want to take that chance. I don't want to let you know who I really am. And of course, it's impossible to form a friendship if you're holding other people at a distance like this. To make friends, you have to run the risk of being rejected.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 9, Friendship, page 124. Listening for specific information. Step 2.
Another aspect of my work involving friendship, and one that I find extremely interesting, has to do with the different ways that men and women can have friends. On the whole, women are much more likely than men to want to get together and talk with each other about what's going on in their lives, about how they're feeling. Men, on the other hand, are usually more comfortable doing things with their friends, such as playing basketball or going to a game. Now, this is a generalization, and it certainly does not apply to all couples. I will say, however, that there are significant aspects of this dynamic in well over 50% of the couples I work with. And the way that this manifests itself in my office is that I'll find that men and women tend to want very different things from one another. Women are much more likely to want to be listened to and to be comforted. And they're not particularly interested in being fixed. Men, for their part, usually want to solve. They want to arrive at solutions. How can this problem be fixed? And, as is often the case, we treat our partners the same way that we want to be treated. Men try to fix women, and women try to listen to men, which is not what either one is wanting. And oftentimes I'll hear something in my office along the lines of, why can't she just be like my buddies? You know, we get along fine. If you happen to see the Clarence Thomas Anita Hill hearings on television, you would have seen this gender difference played out in an extraordinary fashion. Anita Hill accused Clarence Thomas of having sexually harassed her, and then she called a panel of 4 people to support her testimony. These were people who had known her for years, very respectable people. There was a judge, a lawyer, a professor, and all of them stated that Hill confided in them about the harassment at the time it was happening. I'll never forget the interchange between one of the women on Hill's panel and one of the senators, a male, who was questioning her. After she told the senators that Hill had told her about the harassment, One of the senators asked, "So what did you do?" And the woman replied, "I listened to her." And the senator said, "But what advice did you give her?" The woman replied, "Well, I didn't give her any advice. I listened to her." And the senator was incredulous. He was absolutely incredulous. He said to her, "What do you mean? She told you that she was being sexually harassed by her boss, and you didn't give her any advice about what to do?" "Well, no. I just listened to her." And I thought, that is it. That's it in a nutshell. And other senators asked the same kind of questions of her. These guys were so, how to put it, they're so used to giving advice that they couldn't fathom that one friend would not give another friend advice in that kind of situation. In fact, they believed it so strongly that many were convinced that Hill's panel members were lying, that she'd never spoken to them. I found it a remarkably concise and dramatic snapshot of how different men and women can be and how they view friendship. But whatever it is that we want from our friends, and as I said earlier, friendship means different things to different people. It's a fact that we all want and need people in our lives that accept us and love us for who we are. The people we love and who love us back are our friends.
Now complete the steps in your book. This is the end of Chapter 9. Now please fast forward to the end of this side and turn over the cassette to continue. Chapter 10. Love. Page 128. Listening for details. Step 1.
1.
My name is Les. I'm a librarian. I'm divorced and in my late 30s. I enjoy listening to jazz and going to movies, museums, that kind of thing. I'm looking for someone who kind of likes the same things, I guess.
2.
My name is Michael. I'm a doctor, and I work very hard. I like to climb mountains in my spare time. I'm 35 years old, and I'd like to meet an attractive younger woman.
3.
My name is Alicia. I want to meet a kind, dependable man who will be a good father to my 2 children, who are 4 and 6 years old. I'm a computer engineer.
4.
My name is Frank. I'm a junior high school teacher. When I'm off in the summer, I love to do gardening and play baseball. I'm 37 years old.
5.
My name is Sarah, and I'm an artist. I'm in my early 40s. I guess I'm kind of shy, but I'd like to meet someone I can talk to about art and books, things like that.
6.
I'm Suzanne, and I'm really into the healthy lifestyle. I'm in my mid-20s, but I'm looking for a more mature man who makes good money and everything.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 10. Love. Page 130. Listening for specific information. Step 2.
And how long have you and Jim, how long have you been married?
31 years. 31 years, right? We got married in 1967, December 1967.
And that's a long time.
It is a long time.
So I wanted to ask you, how did you initially get interested in each other?
We met when I was a senior in college, and Anne was a senior in high school. And she lived in a small town about 7 miles from where I was studying, and I was attending the same little country church where she and her family went, and that's how we met.
Uh-huh. So, Anne, you were a high school senior.
That's right. I was 16.
Here was this older man.
I was 16 years old, and I just thought he was the best person I'd ever met in my life. I just fell head over heels in love with him immediately at age 16. But at age 16, you usually fall head over heels in love with a lot of people. Oh, but this one stuck. And, I had to wait 11 years before he actually proposed and we got married, which is kind of a long time.
Yeah.
But at age 16, I certainly wasn't ready to get married anyway. One of my greatest fears after I met him, and decided pretty much then and there that he was the man I wanted to marry, but my greatest fear was that he would marry my sister, who was 3 years older than I am and therefore more his age. And I was so relieved when my sister married someone else.
Now, did Jim give you any encouragement? I mean, 11 years, that's a long time to wait.
Very little.
Well, Jim, were you as interested in Anne from the beginning as she was in you?
Yes, I was. But I wasn't very good at showing it, I think. Sometimes. And I really realized after I finished medical school and I was doing my internship out in Seattle.
Now, this was 10 years after we met.
That there was a big hole in my life. And I realized what that hole was. That I didn't have Anne with me. And so I came to New York while Anne was getting her master's degree at Columbia. She'd just come back from 2 years in the Peace Corps in Ethiopia. And I brought many pictures of Seattle to show her, because I understood she was considering a job in Philadelphia, teaching when she finished. So I brought all these pictures of Seattle, what a beautiful place it is, and to encourage her that this was where she should come. And
a rather oblique proposal.
Kind of oblique. But then the next spring I was visiting back in New York, and I got a call from this wonderful older lady in our church. Aunt Amy was her name. And Aunt Amy called up and she said, if you're really interested in that Anne, you'd better get yourself down here, because she might go off and marry one of the Peace Corps people she worked with.
That's true.
Well, I got right in the car, and I drove 67 miles down to her home, and I asked her mother. Her father had died some years before, and I asked her mother for permission to...
No, this is true.
To have Anne's hand. And she was very...
She was very happy.
Very pleased. And then I proposed to Anne.
And Anne was very happy.
Anne was very happy.
And I was very happy.
Yeah.
It was a long time coming, but it was very much worth the wait. But I realized that there were several times when I came very close to marrying someone else, and I feel very fortunate that
you waited.
Yeah.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 10, Love, page 131. Listening for specific information. Step 2.
I think one of the really nice things about our relationship and our marriage has been that from the very beginning it never was all me or all Anne. There were so many things that we'd both done. Whenever we went out, it'd be, well, tell me about the time you went looking for elephants in Ethiopia. And she would remember something that to ask me to tell friends. And we were both proud of what each other had done. So it wasn't a one-sided kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And that's been the way it's been through the 30 years, too. I think that both of us have been not only husband and wife, but also best friends.
Uh-huh.
And proud of each other.
Mm-hmm. And we share a lot of interests. I think that's one of the things that's made our marriage very, very strong.
What interests, for example?
Well, classical music. We love going to concerts.
Cross-cultural living, learning the history and learning some of the language. And we worked in places all over the world.
And we both love outdoors and gardening, walking. We both come from very strong, very loving families, and our families are very important to us. And our faith is very important to us, our involvement in our church, and just the way we see people and the way we like people to be treated and caring for others and that kind of thing.
Uh-huh. In what way do you think you complement each other? I mean, do you have differences that work to your advantage?
Anne does the financial management for our family. Oh, if I did, I think we'd both be in jail by now. Because I hate paying bills and keeping records, and Anne is very meticulous about it. She also has a phenomenal record of our 30 years together.
She's the historian.
Uh-huh.
And they're all cataloged neatly in albums where they can be seen, not stuck in drawers, which is what I would do. Or, it is wonderful, because friends will come from 10 years ago and we'll pull out an album and it'll have pictures that they remember. And it's very meaningful. And that's a talent that I don't have at all.
I think that there are several things that make our marriage very special, and I think strengthen almost any relationship. And one is, I think Jim has alluded to it before, respect for each other. We both respect what the other does, and we're committed to our marriage, and we give each other space when we need to have time alone. But then we love to be together. We just love to spend time being in each other's company. We enjoy each other.
Yeah.
At least I enjoy being with you.
Oh, definitely. I enjoy being with you.
Yeah. Can you think of experiences over the years that have particularly bonded you?
Oh, yes.
Working overseas.
Living in a tent for 3 months.
In the desert. In Somalia.
Now, that was a fairly bonding experience. And, of course, our 2 children have bonded us.
Oh, yeah.
Now, did you know before you got married how many kids you wanted to have?
We knew that we wanted to have children. We didn't talk numbers. Except I remember somewhere thinking that maybe 6 would be nice.
6?
I remember.
Yeah, and then we thought maybe 4. And then after we had 2 boys, we decided that 2 was just fine. But that was a bonding experience, raising our 2 sons. Going through being parents for them as young children and the teenage years, which were not necessarily the happiest of times.
They were challenging.
And now our sons are old enough so that we treat each other as equals. All 4 of us are adults now. So when we get together, it's just a wonderful adult-to-adult relationship.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 10, Love, page 135. Note-taking, taking advantage of rhetorical questions. Step 1. Stop the tape after each beep and write your prediction. 1.
Why do you fall in love with one person, but not another person?
2.
A lot of people might like a 10, but if you're a 5, then who are you going to end up getting married to?
3.
If she graduated from graduate school and he flunked out of kindergarten, do you think that relationship is going to last very long?
4.
You'd have the same age, or about, but what's kind of the accepted age range?
5.
Now, what about the idea that opposites attract?
6.
You know that story of Romeo and Juliet?
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 10. Love. Page 135. Note-taking. Taking advantage of rhetorical questions. Step 2. 1.
Why do you fall in love with one person, but not another person? Well, the sociobiology people, they would tend to say you fall in love, unconsciously, with somebody that's a good genetic match, or something like that.
2.
A lot of people might like a 10, but if you're a 5, then who are you going to end up getting married to? Well, probably somebody closer to a 5.
3.
If she graduated from graduate school and he flunked out of kindergarten, do you think that relationship is going to last very long? Probably not.
4.
You'd have the same age, or about. Now, what's kind of the accepted age range? Usually 5 to 10 years.
5.
Now, what about the idea that opposites attract? You've probably heard that. That's kind of the complementary theory, or complementarity.
6.
You know that story of Romeo and Juliet? Their families hated each other, and they said, "You stay away from him. You stay away from her."
Chapter 10. Love. Page 137. Outlining practice. Step 2.
This seems to be one of the more difficult topics to discuss. What's this thing called love? It seems everybody has a different idea about love. Why do you fall in love with one person, but not another person? Well, the sociobiology people, they would tend to say you fall in love, unconsciously, with somebody that's a good genetic match, or something like that. Boy, she'd produce nice kids, so I love her. Now, sometimes women like guys that are, tall, muscular. Well, the sociobiologist would say that, well, they produce a good, gene pool. That's why we like tall, muscular guys. Something like that. Now, even though you might like somebody and you say, wow, is she beautiful? Well, it's like that movie 10. A lot of people might like a 10, but if you're a 5, then who are you going to end up getting married to? Well, probably somebody closer to a 5. We tend to marry people that are like we are. We tend to really like people that are like we are. And that's homogeneity, or similarity. Some people call this the matching hypothesis, that we tend to be attracted to somebody that's like us. In fact, you're apt to stay married, too, if you marry somebody that's like you are. Of course, the matching part is more than just physical. Maybe you've seen a couple walking down the street and said, wow, what's she doing with him? Maybe she's a 10 and he's a 3 or something. Or the other way around. And what that is that when you match up with someone, first you notice the physical package, but then you start adding in things like their personality, their job, their intelligence maybe, and when you look at the total, you might decide that they're a good match for you, even if physically maybe they're not. What else? Like, let's see, what would be some things that, well, one would be the same educational background. If she graduated from graduate school and he flunked out of kindergarten, do you think that's going to last very long? Probably not. Well, like, for example, I recall one student in a 4-year college, a long time ago, that, well, she didn't go on to graduate school because she was afraid it would break up the marriage. And he just graduated from high school. She's graduated from college. And he kept bugging her about being a college graduate. You're so smart, why don't you do it? Right? Well, you're the college-educated one, you know, that sort of thing. So she didn't want to have even more of a gap, so she actually stayed down, you might say, because he didn't want to go up. Now, that's kind of too bad. So we tend to marry somebody that's similar in education. Often you met them in school. What else should they be the same about? Interests. You'd have about the same interests often. What else? Maybe the same values. Okay. Same religion, maybe. Same race. Same age, or about. Now, what's kind of the accepted age range that, you know, usually 5 to 10 years, with exceptions, of course, but usually within 5 to 10 years. What else would there be? Socioeconomic status, age, education, race, religion, values, interests, things like that.
Now complete the steps in your book. Chapter 10, Love, page 138. Outlining practice. Step 2.
Okay, so generally the more similar you are, the more apt you are to stay married. And that really works. But you might say, well, gee, Bob, I'm a guy who flunked kindergarten and my wife has a graduate degree. Or, well, my mom has a degree and my dad never graduated from high school. Or, what? I don't know. He's Catholic and she's Jewish. Or she's 23 and he's 42. Or whatever it might be. And, hey, they've been doing fine. Well, that could be. But as a general rule, the more different you are in these, it just increases your probability of getting a divorce. We also tend to find people who have similar politics to what we have. If you're liberal, you'll tend to marry someone that's liberal. Or a conservative will marry a conservative because you don't want to marry someone who keeps telling you you're wrong. So, we also marry someone who sort of validates our ideas. We're kind of psychologically comfortable with those people. And as I said, these marriages have a greater chance of lasting. Now, what about the idea that opposites attract? You've probably heard that. That's kind of the complementary theory, or complementarity. I don't know why it is. Academics try to make big words out of little words. Now, instead of the difference theory, you know, they say complementary theory, or complementarity, or something like that. But anyway, difference. Well, that can work for magnets. But with people, difference is not... Well, it doesn't work as well as similarity does. But it can be a factor. Well, like if one person is dominant, are they better off with another dominant person, or are they better off with a person that's more submissive, that likes people telling them what to do? Probably a dominant person is more apt to marry a submissive person. And maybe he or she likes the other person to be dominant, and that works out okay. So there is something to that. Probably two dominants don't work well, or maybe two submissives don't work well. What do you want to do? I don't know, whatever you want to do. Well, I don't know, whatever you want to do. So maybe that probably won't work too well. But in general, the research that we have says that people that marry someone that's like they are tend to stay together. One other factor that can bring a couple together is called the Romeo and Juliet effect. You know that story of Romeo and Juliet? You know, their families hated each other. And they said, you stay away from him. You stay away from her. So what did Romeo and Juliet do? Yeah, they got married. So the Romeo and Juliet theory says that the more opposition you face to a relationship from parents or friends or whoever, the more attractive that relationship is to you. The more people say, don't, you shouldn't, the more you want to do it. Pretty interesting, huh? And it turns out that these couples usually stay together, too. So, those are some of the things that bring people together. And probably the most important thing to remember is the similarity idea, that we tend to be attracted to and happy with people who are like us.
Now complete the steps in your book. This is the end of Chapter 10. This is the end of the audio program. Thanks for listening.